Ubisoft has earned the lukewarm reception Assassin's Creed Shadows has been getting in its early marketing. An AC game set in feudal Japan would have had people foaming at the mouths 10 years ago, but years of deteriorating product quality and reports of employee maltreatment have killed a lot of the goodwill the company built up in the 2000s. While I am sure the game will reach a wide audience, just like the last few have, there has been one particularly common sentiment I've seen online since before the game was even announced, that 2024 is simply too late for Assassin's Creed to tackle Japan. People's reasoning is that media exploring Japanese history is no longer as small of a niche in the West as it was when AC was a burgeoning franchise. From TV shows like Shogun and Blue Eye Samurai to high-profile movies like Silence, people have more exposure and therefore higher expectations for Japanese historical fiction/fantasy than ever before. In the gaming world, one such piece of media towers over the rest, and that is Ghost of Tsushima, the game that gave people the open-world samurai experience they had all been clamoring for all these years. It was such a resounding success that no game in this genre set in Japan can ever come out again without being compared to it. Team Ninja's Rise of the Ronin came out earlier this year, and it is a dense, combat-focused ARPG that had no interest in being the next Ghost of Tsushima, but was held up next to it by players and critics alike all the same. The point is, running around an historical open-world Japan is no longer a novel concept, and Ghost of Tsushima isn't even Ubisoft's only competition this decade. With it and Rise of the Ronin satisfying these Japanese sandbox desires, and a slew of popular media utilizing feudal Japan as a setting, I want to talk about whether or not there is any room left for Assassin's Creed Shadows. If you watched my Ghost of Tsushima review, you might remember that I pushed back against the idea that it was just Japanese Assassin's Creed. I think it does its own thing and scratches a different itch. Perhaps the biggest deviation comes from the setting, because while AC is always centered around cultural hubs, Ghost of Tsushima allows its mechanics and story to sit within Tsushima's coastal borders. On the other side of that spectrum, you have something like Rise of the Ronin, which takes place during the Meiji Restoration in the 1800s. That game's versions of Yokohama, Edo, and Kyoto exist within a Japan that was being transformed by Western influence. As cool as these settings are, they don't satisfy the cultural fixation on the warring clans of mainland feudal Japan. When it comes to structuring its narrative and open-world map, this is where Shadows has the most room to set itself apart, and I think that's its best asset as of right now. Let's get this out of the way. Shadows will not have better landscapes than Ghost of Tsushima. GOT is just such an unbelievably good-looking game, both in terms of graphics and art design, and AC games always do well in this category, but Ghost is best in class, and Shadows will not be able to compete with the handcrafted masterpiece that is the map in this game. Where it can do something new, however, is in the cities. Based on the map we've seen for the game, Kyoto and Osaka are looking like they will be the primary cities that you can explore. Being able to walk the streets of a bustling city in feudal Japan is something we haven't gotten much of in the gaming space, and for all AC's faults, that is the type of experience that the franchise has always done best. Narratively, this version of Japan is especially attractive right now because of the success of the recent adaptation of Shogun by James Clavell. The show takes place a couple decades after Shadows does, and those who watched it may recall that its own version of Oda Nobunaga, a major player in Shadows, played a big part in the backstory of the narrative, so in a way it could kind of be like this game's story leads into that one. I would be incredibly surprised if Tokugawa Ieyasu, the real-life parallel of Toranaga in the show, doesn't show up in his younger years here in Shadows. In addition to that, the show gave us a very cool look at what Osaka could have looked like in the decades after this game is set, and if we can get something that looks this dense, I will very much be sold. The devs of Ghost of Tsushima were also very open about the fact that they anachronistically used armor and weapons from the 15th and 16th centuries, despite the game being set in the 13th, and this was an artistic choice, not an oversight, but it shows how much 1500s Japan encapsulates modern perceptions of the period. Shadows is primed to give us the purest open-world iteration of feudal Japan that we've seen, and that is where it has the most space to stand out in my opinion. Despite the modern imagining of ninjas as silent assassins, most of the shinobi characters in the gaming sphere are combat-focused. From Mortal Kombat to Sekiro to Ninja Gaiden, You could argue some of the best combat systems of all time see you playing as Shinobi. As a result, AC Shadows has the chance to play into that fantasy in a way we rarely get to see. Both Ghost of Tsushima and Rise of the Ronin have stealth mechanics, but neither of them do anything particularly interesting with them. Tsushima is the more refined of the two, surpassing most AC games in terms of basic stealth, but its simple crouch and stab mechanics really don't hold up as well next to the fighting and exploration systems. Now, Assassin's Creed Shadows claims that it does want to prioritize stealth beyond what a game like Ghost of Tsushima or earlier Assassin's Creed games were able to give us, and on paper it looks like they intend to deliver. We have an improved cover system, prone movement, momentum assassinations, non-combatants who can call for help, and of course the titular light and darkness mechanics. The urban setting also opens up more options for stealth level design than the open enemy camps of Ghost of Tsushima and other recent AC games. If Shadows is able to stick the landing on all of these things, it could end up being the best AAA stealth game we've had in a while. However, this is Ubisoft, and we have no way of knowing if they can manage that. I've been trying to keep up with some of the previews online, and some, like Jake Baldino from GameRanks, have stated that the enemy AI seems sloppy, among other issues. If the stealth AI and detection system of this game don't function properly, then it really doesn't matter how many cool mechanics they add, and poor AI is definitely par for the Assassin's Creed course. AC Mirage has some of the best stealth in the franchise, but it is held back by brainless enemies, while its predecessor, AC Valhalla, had AI so bad that it was really never functional, even after years of patches. In addition to all of this, the game apparently won't be utilizing social stealth mechanics, and this really sucks, because social stealth is the primary mechanic that sets AC apart, as far as stealth goes. A lot of people had hoped that Mirage's half-baked revisitation of the mechanic would have led to it returning to the franchise for good, and it seems like that is not the case. Now, I really like that it's doubling down on traditional stealth, but the only reason Shadows is particularly interesting in that respect is that we've been so starved for proper stealth experiences. 20 years ago, we wouldn't bat an eye at prone crawling or light mechanics, and while those things have been sorely missed lately, social stealth could have made this game unique within the entire genre, not just this generation. I also associate Shinobi characters with the type of agility people also tie to Assassin's Creed, and that's another place this game might stand out. Neither Ghost of Tsushima nor Rise of the Ronin prioritize traversal, and while Rise pulls ahead here with the silly fun of its grapple-glider combo, parkouring around both these games is kind of awkward and sometimes annoying. What little we have seen here reaffirms my belief that the traversal will look cooler and more fluid than in the competition, but once again I'm feeling like the game is aiming for the bare minimum here. I've been trying to look for signs of unique parkour pathways, and I've yet to see anything beyond these sort of basic parkour starters. Back when Mirage only had a single screenshot showing off Baghdad, I was able to make a video going over different parkour opportunities that were already obvious, and we're not seeing that right now. Now, we haven't seen much of the big cities yet, so I'd love to be proven wrong, but the architecture they have shown off hasn't done much to imply that we will have a freedom of movement that even matches the small steps forward taken by Mirage. Both Rise of the Ronin and Ghost of Tsushima cater to a samurai fantasy above all else, and so the Shinobi fantasy is one that still has a lot of space to be explored. While it isn't looking like stealth and traversal will dig into all of the franchise's best strengths, they are still factors that might allow Shadows to stand apart from its contemporaries. That being said, the Shinobi fantasy is only half the game. Ubisoft has been overt in its intention to have players evenly split their time between playing as a ninja and playing as a samurai, meaning they will very much intend to compete with Ghost and Rise on that front too. Here, I believe they will find less success. Ghost of Tsushima just nailed that pop culture idea of being a samurai so well. The internal conflict around Bushido culture, the stylish animations for cleaning your blade, the way you can call out and have these split-second standoffs, the environmental design, the black and white filter on the ghost stance. It is overt in its homage to Kurosawa films and its camera work and iconography, touching on every possible aspect of samurai culture that the modern zeitgeist has become obsessed with. It is heavily romanticized in a way most warrior classes tend to be, and technically this is a place where Shadows could make a mark, but I don't really see them accomplishing that. While I would like to see the game portray a more grounded version of the samurai, where there are fewer speeches about honor and discipline and more focus on the brutality of the feudal era, Assassin's Creed and Ubisoft don't usually excel at telling grounded stories like that, and so I'm not expecting much in that category. The biggest gameplay component of the samurai fantasy is combat, and combat has never been Assassin's Creed's strong suit. That isn't to say it's terrible, but it is always one of the weaker parts of the experience. In the old days, it was incredibly well animated and fluid, but desperately shallow, while the new games have a lot more depth, but not in a way that stands out at all in an era of fantastic combat systems. There isn't anything glaringly bad about what I've seen in Shadows, but even if you limit yourself just to the tiny pool that is open-world historical games set in Japan, it doesn't seem to match its rivals. Ghost of Tsushima has some of the most visually pleasing combat I have ever seen, while still leaving room for a much higher skill ceiling than the old AC games. On the other side of that spectrum is Rise of the Ronin, a child of Team Ninja, who have made some of the deepest combat systems in gaming. And this is no Neo, but you could put dozens of hours into learning this combat system. 10 years ago, just being able to have a samurai battle in an open field would have made this game unique, but that time is long past, and Ubisoft isn't marketing anything that leads me to believe it will stand out in any way over the competition. With neither the visual splendor of Ghost nor the depth of Rise of the Ronin, it's hard to see the combat in Shadows wowing me. I mean, I look at these parries, and it's hard to see how Ubisoft thought they would be acceptable when you compare them to Ghost of Tsushima or Sekiro. With all this combined, I think Shadows will be hard-pressed to make itself stand out when it comes to the samurai fantasy, as that idea has been thoroughly explored at a level of quality that Ubisoft hasn't reached in a long time. I think AC Shadows looks cool, I really do, and no matter what, it will have its niche. There are plenty of things it promises that Ghost of Tsushima and Rise of the Ronin simply don't do. The focus on mainland Japan in the 1500s is unique, and I'm really excited to see Kyoto and Osaka, and it's looking like they're putting a lot of effort into building up the stealth system. But at the same time, it's still valid to criticize Ubisoft for jumping into this so late and not being more prepared to combat the competition. They had the chance to make this game really stand out in its moment-to-moment gameplay with social stealth, cool parkour, and a more unique combat system, and while of course it's early, we haven't seen much of this game yet, what they've chosen to show us is a lot of stuff that other games, especially Ghost of Tsushima, have already done better, and that is concerning. But if we're being honest, whether or not Assassin's Creed Shadows is unique really isn't the issue. Not to invalidate my own video, but I don't think it's an oversaturation of open-world feudal Japan games that people have a problem with. In fact, I imagine people wish we had more of them. The real problem is that people don't have faith that Ubisoft will do a good job, and more comparisons to other games just adds fuel to that fire. If this game were coming out from Rockstar or Guerrilla Games, you would be seeing comparisons, sure, but not the level of hate we're seeing for Shadows, and that is why the first line of this video was that Ubisoft has earned this response. A game like this should be a slam dunk, but Ubisoft as a name leaves such a bad taste in so many people's mouths that if alternatives to their products exist, choosing not to buy from them is an easy decision for a lot of people. And so it really isn't an issue of being too late just because competition like Ghost of Tsushima and Rise of the Ronin exist. People want more games like this. Instead, it feels too late to get an open-world feudal Japan game from a version of Ubisoft that people actually trust to make it. The Ubisoft that was innovative and had a ton of diverse IPs, and that, very importantly, had the trust of its player base. 15 years ago, the company wouldn't have really needed that trust because no one else was making games like this. But now, with more reputable companies like Sucker Punch and Team Ninja making games that explore Japanese history with essentially the same gameplay loop as AC, Shadows has a lot more to prove. We will just have to wait and see if Ubisoft Quebec can answer that call. That is all I have. Let me know what you hope to see from AC Shadows in the comments, and totally unrelated question that I'll also ask is what indie games that you're playing. I talk a lot about big AAA titles, and I think it's nice to spend time with indie games that don't have all that extra baggage. I just picked up a narrative-heavy game called Until Then, and I'm really enjoying that so far. Very Space for the Unbound-esque. So that's my indie recommendation for the month, and that's not an ad or anything, I just felt like showcasing it. I still like Assassin's Creed games, despite their flaws and how vocal I am about them, but if you are in the camp that feels like Ubisoft has burned you too many times to care about Shadows, then I suppose this is your reminder that it's okay to step away from the franchise, especially since there are so many great games out there these days. Anyhow, do have a great day, and take care of yourself.
Let's go.